Don't touch that dial, or you'll jettison half the hull, Terran said, voice low with carefully contained panic. He slapped Rathany's hand away from the navigation console, heart pounding so hard he wondered if she could hear it. The click and hiss of life support behind them offered no comfort in this cramped cockpit. Her glowing, silver-blue eyes flickered in the dim overhead lights, and she tilted her head as if questioning the seriousness of his threat. She was close, too close, the faint gleam of her bioluminescent markings dancing over the curve of her neck. He tried not to look at how her scales caught the electric flicker of the console, or how her parted lips almost seemed to beckon him forward. He forced his gaze back to the readouts on the screen. Navigating an asteroid field while an uninvited alien stowaway messed with his ship's flight controls was the very last thing he needed tonight. He stepped back, giving himself space. Or trying to. With the pilot's seat jammed up against the back compartment, there wasn't much room for a tall human man and an even taller alien woman. Her skin, scales, more alike, shifted in color and pattern when she changed emotions, and at the moment, Terran read a shimmering wave of annoyance. He'd seen enough aliens to know they had many ways of expressing their displeasure, but something about her posture suggested she was mere seconds from tearing out the control panels by force. She gave a tiny huff, and he caught the faint, sweet scent that seemed to cling to her. It reminded him of night air after a thunderstorm, a cool, tingling aroma with a pinch of spice that made his head buzz. She leaned closer, and Terran's frustration spiked at how she still refused to give him any personal space. He tried to focus on the coordinates on the battered screen. The readout flickered, glitchy as usual, but he'd learned to parse the data by feel. His ship, the Light Spear, might have been a piece of junk, but it was his piece of junk, and he'd do anything to keep her airborne. "Why did you pull us off that course?" she asked. She spoke interplanetary common well enough, though her accent wrapped each word in a sort of teasing curl, as though she found the language amusing. "Weren't you heading to Evar 9? Terran exhaled. "Yes, until I realized a certain someone tampered with my flight plan." "You plan on telling me why you hijacked my ship?" She lifted her chin, letting a strand of her luminous hair, if it even was hair, slide across her shoulder. "I needed passage out of this system. I saw your battered crate and thought no one would notice if I boarded." She seemed to shrug with her entire body, an elegant motion that made her filaments glow in swirling patterns around her collarbones. "Didn't realize you'd be so territorial. Or so skittish." "Skittish?" He bristled. He was many things, grumpy, cynical, borderline desperate, but skittish wasn't one of them. His gaze darted over her form. Her scales weren't just dull ridges. They were layered, pearlescent segments shifting in subtle patterns whenever she breathed. In the close quarters, he caught a sharper whiff of her again. The blood pounded in his temples. "Look, I don't care why you're here. You need to stay put and let me do the piloting, or we both die. Got it?" She lifted an eyebrow ridge, a small ripple of color dancing across her cheekbones. "Fine. Only because I have other uses for you." He let out a bark of laughter. "Uses, huh? That's some way to talk to a man whose ship you nearly destroyed." Her lips parted in a flash of white teeth. "What can I say? You're the one who found me in that cargo hold." With surprising gentleness, she brushed her fingertips over the back of his wrist. Her scales were warm, and the slight friction raised a tingle along his arm. "And you smell different. Like you're carrying a world of new experiences." Terran pulled his hand free, unsettled by how intensely she stared at him. "All right, we're done with the weird talk. If you want a ride, you better earn it. Start by telling me your name." "Rathany." She let the syllables slip off her tongue with a note of pride. "I was once part of the Sarthan Expeditionary Force. You wouldn't understand the intricacies of my role. But I'm not exactly in their good graces anymore. If you're wise, you'll stay out of their path." "Neat." Terran pressed a few keys to double-check the hull integrity. The asteroid field outside glowed faintly as chunks of ice and rock reflected the distant starlight. He'd snuck in here to hide from the mercenaries that had been dogging him from the last station. He didn't have time for new drama with a fugitive alien. "Look, I'm Terran. pilot, scavenger, all-around doer of odd jobs. You have a plan after we get out of this field? She tilted her head in that same curious way. To be honest, I just wanted to get away. Figured the rest out later. Maybe find a corner of the galaxy that doesn't demand my life in exchange for services. Sounds like you're either a runaway or a criminal, he mused. Not that I'm judging. Her eyes narrowed, but he didn't sense immediate aggression. My people have strict traditions. I refuse to follow them. They don't take kindly to those who challenge the old ways. He glanced at her shimmering arms. The patterns on her scales pulsed with an undercurrent of tension, like a language of color and movement that hinted at her mood. Her eyes drifted over him, almost as if analyzing him down to each molecule. Stop staring, he muttered, flicking switches to correct their trajectory. What exactly is it about me that's so fascinating? Her lips curved up in a small, knowing grin. I've traveled far, and I've encountered many species, but yours has a particular scent. It's strong, but not repulsive. Sharp, almost sweet on the edges. I find it intriguing. Terrence swallowed, a flush creeping up his neck. Of all the weird encounters he'd had, this one took the top prize. Yeah, well, don't get too used to it, he said, trying to ignore the sweat beading on his brow. Once I land somewhere safe, I'm getting a shower. Or 3. Doesn't help that life support's on the fritz and the humidity in here is about 2 steps short of a swamp. Her gaze slid over him, and he had the sudden, wild impression that she wanted him to avoid a shower for as long as possible. But she said nothing. Instead, she drifted back to the co-pilot's seat and perched there, her scaled legs crossing elegantly. Have it your way, she said. But not until I decide your debt is paid. Debt? He frowned. You let me aboard your vessel, now you're obligated to carry me safely away. In return, I can offer you protection from the same threat you're running from. He stared at her. How would you know who I'm running from? Her eyes flashed. Because I recognize the insignia on that frigate you were evading in orbit. Slavers, yes? Or maybe corporate enforcers who dabble in that trade. Doesn't matter to me. I have a personal vendetta against them. Let's say our interests align. If they catch you, you're as good as sold off at the next black market. If they catch me, I'll be executed for desertion. Maybe we could watch each other's backs. Terran clenched his jaw. The woman was definitely trouble. He could sense it in the tightness of her posture and the gleam in her eyes. But she wasn't wrong. The mercenaries hunting him worked under contract for the Hellion conglomerate, known to dabble in forced labor. He'd crossed them on a salvage run, accidentally stumbling on one of their hush-hush shipments, and ever since, he'd been on the run. Maybe having this tall, graceful alien on his side would be an advantage. All right, but no more messing with my flight path, he said. We get out of this field in one piece, then we talk terms. She gave a small nod. Fine. Just know, I have my own ways of survival, and I will not hesitate to defend myself if you cross me. Terran forced a dry laugh. Likewise, sweetheart. She watched him carefully, as though filing away every detail of his scent, his mannerisms. He tried to ignore the flutter in his stomach. She was definitely different from any alien he'd encountered, strong, self-assured, and dangerously perceptive. The console beeped, and Terran deftly maneuvered the ship between drifting rocks. Outside the viewport, lumps of ancient cosmic debris floated like silent guardians. A hush fell over them, broken only by the hum of the ship and the occasional crackle of energy from the battered engines. Terran prayed the light spear would hold together. They emerged from the asteroid field hours later, both exhausted from the near-constant vigilance required to avoid collisions. Terran engaged the autopilot for a short break, hoping to find an outpost or derelict station where he could restock. He'd nearly nodded off when Rathany's voice cut through the silence. Your seat is not very comfortable, she complained softly, shifting her weight. It's an old ship, he muttered, stifling a yawn. Built for function, not comfort. Plus, it's only meant for one occupant. You're lucky I've even got a second seat. Or that I haven't thrown you in the cargo hold. She chuckled, a low, throaty sound. I wouldn't fit. Not comfortably, anyway. You should feed me. He turned, one eyebrow raised. Excuse me? She arched a brow right back. You heard me. I'm hungry. This was the moment Taryn realized that playing host to an alien might require more than just letting her loiter in his cockpit. He jerked his head toward the back of the ship. Rations are in the supply bin. Hope you like dehydrated protein packs and algae chips. Show me, she said. He sighed and guided her past the narrow corridor, where the overhead lights flickered ominously. On the way, her hand brushed his arm, sending another jolt of warmth through him. Taryn tried to ignore it. She was just an alien stowaway, no reason for his body to react like that. He reminded himself that her interest in him seemed largely due to his, well, unique smell. Not exactly flattering. He popped open the storage compartment. Pick whatever. Just don't. Rat Honey dug around, leaning down so that her scaled shoulders and back caught the dull light in a hypnotic sheen. He clamped his mouth shut, suddenly all too aware of how closed in this space was, how the recycled air carried both their scents mingling in a strange swirl. She sniffed at a pack of dried algae and wrinkled her nose. This is edible? It won't poison you, he replied, rummaging for a water pouch. My species usually does fine on it. If you're physiologically similar enough, it should sustain you temporarily. She opened the pack, gave the contents another curious sniff, then placed the chip on her tongue. Her scales flared with a ripple of color as she chewed. Tasteless, she said, but tolerable. Then her gaze slid to him again. You produce that odor more strongly when you're anxious. He froze, water pouch half lifted to his lips. Can you not? Do you have to comment on that every time? She shrugged and took another bite. It's interesting. It's new to me. My people don't experience smell in quite the same way. We rely on subtle pheromonal shifts. Yours is more direct, more pungent, but not unpleasant. He felt heat rise to his cheeks. No one had ever described him as pungent in such a strangely alluring tone. Well, don't get used to it, because the second I find a functioning shower, I'm scrubbing myself from head to toe. She tilted her head. What if I forbid it? He blinked. You can't forbid me from bathing. Her lips quirked in a playful grin, but there was something beneath the humor. I can, she said, if I provide you with a reason. He snorted and turned away. Yeah, well, I'm not letting you dictate my hygiene, thanks. Eat your algae chips and let me see if we can locate a safe port. She followed him back to the cockpit, where the console displayed a star map. The nearest outpost he recognized was an old fueling station orbiting a barren planet called Valanis. It wasn't exactly reputable, but it was off the main trade routes, which meant fewer corporate patrols. Taryn keyed in the coordinates. We can stop there, he said. Refuel, maybe get some parts. It's rough, though. Might not be safe if you're worried about your old associates. Rahani settled into the co-pilot's seat, crossing her legs and cradling her half-eaten algae pack. I'll handle myself. Just don't stray too far. Humans break easily. He rolled his eyes. I'm not planning on fighting your battles, but thanks for the concern. Inside, a twinge of curiosity nagged him. Just how strong was she? She carried herself like a warrior, yet she had a certain regal fluidity that suggested a different kind of discipline. He'd heard of her kind, Sarthin, only in passing. Some rumors said they were an ancient race of formidable telepaths. Others claimed they'd engineered their own bodies with specialized glands to produce illusions of color. He decided not to pry yet. He had enough on his plate just keeping them alive. They drifted into a tense silence. The hum of the engines throbbed in Taryn's ears. Each minute that passed made him more conscious of the sweat clinging to his skin, the dryness in his throat. He needed a shower, but that required a working water system. The Lightspear's main shower was busted ages ago, and he relied on station facilities to keep clean. A muscle in his jaw twitched as he considered how Rat Honey might react if he found a place to bathe. The notion that she might physically stop him was absurd, but not impossible. He coughed. So, he said, pushing down the awkwardness, why do you keep focusing on my scent? Are Sarthen always this direct? She looked at him, and for the first time, he thought he saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. We experience others through every sense available. My sense of smell is heightened, but not in the typical sense. I pick up on chemical signatures, emotional states. On my homeworld, we identify partners by the resonance of their bodily signals. It's intimate. She cleared her throat, as though not used to explaining. For you, it's overwhelming. But for me, it's the gateway to understanding who you are. And I find your chemical resonance compelling. He blinked, trying to process that. Okay, that's something. He scrunched up his nose. And you want me to keep smelling like fear and engine grease because it tells you more about me? She shrugged, the motion lifting her hair like filaments so they glowed. Something like that. It's more accurate than your words. He forced a laugh, even though his stomach fluttered. My words say I'm a charming, dashing pilot who's definitely not scared. She only stared at him in that penetrating way she had, and then the corner of her mouth curved up. He frowned, focusing on the star map to hide his expression. This was going to be a very long trip. Maybe she'd get bored of his smell, especially once she was free to roam wherever it was she planned on going. Maybe she'd realize humans bathed, and that was just part of it. He tried not to let the tension coil too hard in his gut. He wasn't sure if the apprehension was more about the danger outside or the strange, heady attraction weaving between them. Scent or no scent, Radhani was mesmerizing. That alone put him on edge. He'd been burned before, trusting the wrong people, and this felt like a setup for another heartbreak, or worse. Another few hours passed without event. They shared water pouches in reluctant silence, occasionally exchanging a sharp glance or a sarcastic comment. Terran tried to keep his mind on the controls and off the fact that Radhani's presence filled the cockpit with a strangely charged air. Her posture never fully relaxed. She was coiled like a cat, ready to spring if danger struck. When Villani's finally crept into view, Terran's shoulders sagged with relief. The planet was a dusty brown orb, ringed with debris and metal fragments from failed terraforming attempts decades ago. The fueling station, an ugly, squat hub, orbited a safe distance above the swirling storms. Terran guided the light spear in, dealing with the board controller's instructions. They were assigned a docking bay on the lower ring, the station's least glamorous section. Perfect for their purposes. The ship jolted as it latched onto the docking clamps. Terran powered down the engines. All right, he said. We stay quiet, keep our heads down, and get what we need. Fuel, parts, some food that doesn't taste like chalk. And if I can manage it, a real shower. He expected an argument, but Radhani only gave him a solemn nod. I'll stay close. If I sense any threat, I'll react. He eyed her slender but powerful limbs. Try not to kill anyone unless absolutely necessary. We don't need more trouble. She said nothing, but the flicker of color across her scales told him she considered trouble a matter of interpretation. With a sigh, he unbuckled his harness and stepped into the cramped corridor. The docking hatch creaked as he pried it open, revealing a short, run-down passage into the station's lower ring. The stale, recycled air that rushed in was only marginally better than his ship's. Graffiti lined the bulkheads, and flickering lights gave the entire place a haunted feel. Radhani followed him out, her senses clearly on high alert. He swiped a hand through his messy, dark hair. Just let me do the talking. She smirked. I wasn't aware you were so eloquent with words. He shot her a look. I can handle negotiations. My father taught me the finer points of bartering in seedy outposts just like this. They emerged into a corridor that led to a busy sector filled with vendors hawking questionable goods. Figures from dozens of species drifted through, each with a story that probably involved running from someone or something. Terran spotted a sign for a repair shop and steered them there. A stooped, three-armed mechanic barked a greeting, but Terran waved him off. First he wanted to check the prices. He rummaged through bins of spare parts, finding a few that might fix the glitch in the Lightspear's autopilot. Radhani hovered behind him, scanning the area as if expecting an ambush at any moment. When Terran approached the mechanic's counter, Rathani stood so close he could feel her body heat against his back. "You're crowding me," he whispered, trying not to sound too rattled. She leaned in, her breath warm against his ear. "You smell nervous again," she teased. "I like it." His face burned. "Cut it out." He forced a tight smile at the mechanic, who eyed Rathani with open curiosity. "How much for these?" Terran asked, placing the salvage parts on the counter. The mechanic scratched his wrinkled chin, seemed about to name a price, then flicked his gaze to Rathani's luminous scales. "Where'd you pick up the Sarthin female, friend?" "Not your concern," Terran said, voice going flat. "Price?" The mechanic pursed his lips. "I could give you a discount if you let me ask her a few questions." Rathani stiffened, and Terran felt her tension ripple through the air. "We're not here to answer questions," Terran said, forcing a casual shrug. "We're here for parts." "That's it. So name your price, or we'll find someone else who will." The mechanic scowled, muttered something under his breath. Finally, he quoted an inflated number. Terran groaned but didn't argue. He wasn't in a position to haggle too fiercely. He transferred credits, grabbed the parts, and stalked out, Rathani a silent shadow at his side. Once they were out of earshot, Rathani hissed softly. "They will whisper about my presence." "Let them." Terran stuck the parts in his satchel. "We'll be gone soon." She didn't protest. They moved deeper into the station, navigating narrow halls until Terran found a cheap fueling kiosk that offered to top up his ship's reserves for a reasonable fee. He arranged payment, ignoring the suspicious glances they received. With that squared away, he focused on his next priority, a shower. He spotted a sign for public wash stalls tucked into a side corridor. He paused, glancing at Rathani. "You can wait outside," he offered, trying to sound casual. She stared at the neon sign that flickered above the grimy door. "You do realize there's a high likelihood of criminals lurking in there, waiting to mug unsuspecting travelers?" He shrugged. "I've got enough credits left for a wash. I need it. And I'll be careful." Her nostrils flared, and he suddenly realized she was breathing in his scent again. "Very well," she said. "But I'm coming in." His eyes bulged. "What?" "You heard me," she stated calmly, crossing her arms. "I won't compromise your safety or mine." He swallowed. "You can't just, people shower in there. It's not exactly co-ed." She arched a brow ridge. "I'm unfamiliar with the concept." He sighed, pressing a hand over his eyes. "Of course you are. Look, fine, just wait by the entrance, all right? You don't have to stand guard over me while I'm actually..." He trailed off, feeling ridiculous. "Just give me a little privacy." She studied his face, then gave a small nod. "I'll wait at the door." Relieved, Terran slipped inside. The wash stall area was as dingy as expected, with flickering lights and the stench of old disinfectant. He found a free cubicle, locked the door, and leaned back, letting out a shaky breath. Finally, he could wash off days of sweat and tension. The idea that Rathani was right outside the door unsettled him, but also gave him a sense of strange security. He still wasn't sure why she was so fixated on him, but at least she seemed genuinely concerned about potential threats. He activated the shower's meager water flow, stripped quickly, and stepped under the lukewarm drizzle. He hissed at the temperature but started scrubbing anyway, using the cheap station soap. The water swirling down the drain turned dark with grime, and he felt a sense of relief. Maybe after this, his mind would clear and he'd stop reacting to Rathani's presence like an awkward teenager. Then, behind the door, he heard footsteps. The lock jiggled. Terran tensed. "Occupied," he called. The door slid open anyway, revealing Rathani, scales bright in the flickering overhead light. She slipped inside, shutting the door behind her, ignoring his shocked protests. Terran nearly jumped out of his skin, instinctively covering himself. "What the? I told you to wait outside!" She held up a finger to her lips in a motion for silence. Someone was approaching, she said softly, stepping closer. Her eyes roamed over the small stall, checking corners. Then her gaze landed on him. He tried to ignore how her presence in this cramped, humid stall made his heart hammer. He was standing here, soaked, naked, covered in foam. She was half an arm's length away, fully dressed in her fitted alien garb, her filaments glowing. "You can't just barge in," he growled, fighting the urge to flinch away. "There was nowhere to hide in here. Privacy is—" She fixed him with a cool stare, stepping around to position herself between him and the door. "I told you, I sense danger." Her eyes flicked down briefly, but her expression didn't waver. "I will not let you be taken by surprise." His pulse thudded in his throat. "Could you at least turn around or something?" he managed, voice cracking slightly. She tilted her head, puzzled, but complied, facing the door. He exhaled, relief and embarrassment tangling in his chest. The water continued to drizzle over him. His limbs felt shaky. He resumed washing, trying to hurry. But then he noticed she hadn't actually closed her eyes. He cleared his throat. "Everything okay?" he asked sarcastically. Her reply was barely audible over the shower. "You smell different now. Without the layers of sweat and grime." He ran a hand through his wet hair. "Yeah, well, that's what soap does. Kills my apparently irresistible chemical signature." She glanced over her shoulder. He saw the faint reflection of her luminous eyes in the water-streaked metal of the stall. "It's still you," she said softly. "Only cleaner. More subtle. But still, enticing." His breath caught in his throat, and he cursed himself for the rush of heat that went straight to his gut. "Right. Great. Could you maybe wait outside until I finish? I'm done anyway." He quickly rinsed, ignoring how his body reacted to her presence. Shutting off the water, he reached for a threadbare towel on the small ledge. She didn't budge, but at least she didn't face him directly. He dripped water on the floor, fumbling with the towel to dry himself. "You said you sensed danger. Did you see who it was?" She lifted a shoulder. "An armed figure. Possibly just a station guard looking for bribes. They saw me standing guard, decided to move on." He rubbed the cloth over his hair, heart still pounding. "Right. Well, thanks for the heads up." He wriggled back into his clothes, the fabric clinging awkwardly to his damp skin. Her presence crackled with tension. Finally, he was mostly decent, though he felt no less vulnerable. "Okay, I'm done," he muttered, stepping around her to unlock the door. He paused, noticing her eyes flick over him one more time. This time, her expression was one of deep curiosity, as though memorizing every shift of his posture. He felt like a specimen under a microscope. Without another word, they slipped out into the corridor. Taryn's cheeks burned. He'd never had a shower experience that intense or awkward in his life. Radhani hovered near him, scanning the passage for threats. "You didn't have to do that," he said under his breath. "I can handle myself." She gave him a level look. "Your species doesn't have strong protective armor or scales. I didn't want to risk them catching you unaware." He realized she truly believed that her presence was necessary. Despite the annoyance and embarrassment, a part of him felt oddly grateful. She'd put herself in the line of potential fire just to ensure he stayed safe. "All right, point taken," he said gruffly, tugging on the collar of his shirt. "But next time, at least warn me before you come barging in." She gave a small nod. Then, lifting her nose slightly, she inhaled. "I think I preferred you before," she said softly, a hint of regret in her tone. "The smell was stronger." He blinked in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "I smelled like a rancid engine filter." A tiny smile ghosted her lips. "You smelled like you. And in my culture, that's everything." Before he could retort, she turned and began walking, leaving him to gape after her. He hurried to catch up, ignoring the odd pang in his chest. They scouted the corridors for a short time, making sure no mercenaries lurked. Taryn tried to keep a low profile, slipping out of direct sight whenever a group of station toughs appeared. Radhani moved beside him, her posture regal, her luminous skin a beacon in the dim corridors. But no one challenged them directly. At last they returned to the light spear, arms loaded with what few supplies they could afford. Fuel rods, spare parts, a couple of ration packs that might actually taste like food. Terran set them on the floor of the cargo area, wiping sweat off his brow. "That was exhausting," he muttered. "And I literally just took a shower. Now I'm sweating again." Radhani stepped inside, the automatic lights blinking overhead. She set her share of supplies down, then turned to face him. "We have what we need," he sighed. "Mostly. I'd have liked more, but credits are tight." He rubbed the back of his neck. "We should get moving before the Helion goons find us." She took a step closer, her scales shifting to a mellow, blue-green glow. "And then? We run forever?" He shrugged. "Until they decide it's not worth chasing me. Or until something else kills me. That's the life I lead." Her expression softened. "I offered you my protection, Terran." He barked out a laugh, short and humorless. "I don't even know you. Why should I trust you?" She fixed him with an unwavering gaze. "Because we need each other. You need someone strong enough to fend off the Helion conglomerate, and I need someone who can navigate the galaxy. Together, maybe we survive." A knot formed in his chest. He wanted to argue, to push her away. But her eyes glowed with that fierce sincerity that made him feel oddly safe. And she did save him from a potentially nasty ambush in the showers. Something about her unflinching confidence spoke to the deep loneliness he'd carried for years. "It's just a matter of time before things get complicated," he murmured. "They're already complicated," she said, stepping closer. The warmth radiating from her scaled body grazed his senses. "And your smell, you changed it." She inhaled, as though verifying the difference. "Clean, but still Terran. I can sense the anxiety under your skin. The wariness." He forced a weak grin. "If you had my past, you'd be wary too." She reached out, fingertips brushing the seam of his sleeve. "I want to learn about your past. But I will not force it from you." The sincerity in her tone made him swallow. He wasn't used to someone wanting to understand him. For so long, he'd been a lone wanderer, drifting from job to job, trust in short supply. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Aye, maybe. Another time." She nodded. "We should depart then." He gestured for her to follow him to the cockpit. As the cargo door sealed behind them, Terran tried to shake off the strange mix of gratitude and frustration swirling inside him. He settled into the pilot's seat and powered up the thrusters. Radhani slid into the co-pilot's seat, scanning the readouts with keen attention. The station clamps released, and the light spear drifted into open space once again, leaving Velanis behind. They cruised away from the planet, and Terran set a course for the uncharted fringes where the Helion conglomerate rarely patrolled. The hum of the engines enveloped them in a soothing lull. The tension of the station visit began to fade, replaced by the familiar, lonely comfort of the cockpit. But this time, he wasn't alone. He could sense Radhani's presence as surely as if she were pressed against him. Her luminous eyes and shifting scales reminded him how alien she was, yet how oddly comforting her presence felt. She watched him for a while, as if studying how he operated the ship. Then she spoke quietly. "Tell me about yourself. More than just your name and your occupation." He stiffened, gripping the throttle. "There's not much to say." She shifted in her seat. "Everyone has a story, Terran. Even those who claim they don't." He exhaled. "Fine. I grew up on a dusty mining colony. My father taught me to fly old cargo skiffs. He died when I was 19, and I took my first ship job with the Helion conglomerate. Didn't know any better. Found out they were smuggling people. I tried to speak out. Nearly got killed for it. Spent the last few years outrunning them and picking up odd salvage gigs. That's it. Happy?" Her gaze was steady. "I'm sorry about your father. And I understand your hatred for Helion. They've taken much from many." He glanced at her. "What about you? You going to tell me about this expeditionary force you deserted?" She looked away, her filaments dimming. My people's traditions are ancient, strict. I was expected to fulfill a certain role, to be bonded to someone of high status, to produce offspring who would inherit my clan's lineage. I refused. They branded me a deserter for defying not just my superiors, but also my entire culture's expectations. Now I'm alone. A flicker of empathy tugged at him. That's rough, he said. Guess we both know how it feels to be on the run from people who want to control our lives. She nodded, then a small smile broke over her lips. You see, Taryn, we do have things in common. More than just desperation. He let out a tired chuckle. Yeah, I guess so. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the starlight reflecting on her shimmering scales. Her presence was oddly soothing now that the initial tension had cooled. He only realized how much time had passed when the ship's console beeped, indicating they were clear of the local system and free to make a faster jump. Strap in, he said, reaching for the throttle. We're jumping to a less traveled route. Might be bumpy. She obliged, securing her harness. Are you certain there's no one there? I don't want to run into your Hellion friends. They're not my friends. Taryn rolled his eyes. And yeah, it's a back route. Half the time, pirates lurk out there, but it's better than the guaranteed Hellion blockade on the main route. If we're lucky, we'll slip through unnoticed. A flicker of challenge lit her gaze. If we're unlucky? He swallowed. Then I hope your talk of protection isn't just talk. She smirked, the glow of her scales intensifying. It isn't. With that unspoken promise hanging in the air, Taryn punched in the jump sequence. The ship vibrated, artificial gravity flickered, and the stars outside the viewport warped into streaks of light. The light spear surged forward, and Taryn felt the familiar drop in his stomach that always accompanied these abrupt transitions. Once they stabilized, he exhaled, releasing the controls. Here we go, he said softly. Rathani stared out at the swirling patterns of energy beyond the viewport. The jump corridor glowed in pulses of green and blue. It's beautiful, she murmured. Such color. I never tire of it. He glanced at her. It's not too different from the patterns on your scales. Ever notice that? She looked down at her arms, the subtle luminescence shifting. No one's ever told me that before. He realized how close they were. The cockpit was always cramped, but he swore he felt every breath she took. Her eyes lingered on his face, and the tension that sparked between them felt electric. He wasn't sure how to handle it. Part of him wanted to close the gap, press his mouth against those strangely inviting lips, and see what her scaled skin felt like under his fingertips. Another part screamed at him to keep his guard up. He'd known her less than a day, and already she'd all but stripped him emotionally bare. She had a way of seeing right through him. He cleared his throat and forced himself to focus on the console. We've got a few hours in this jump corridor. Might as well make ourselves comfortable. Get some rest. She made a soft sound of agreement, though she didn't tear her eyes away from him right away. Finally, she unbuckled herself, shifting to recline in the co-pilot's seat. He tried to ignore how her lithe body curved in the dim lights, how the edges of her scales shimmered. I'll rest, she said. But if you try to remove me from this seat, I'll snap your wrist. He snorted a half-laugh. I wouldn't dare. He eased back in his own seat, letting his eyes drift shut. The hum of the ship lulled him. Sleep threatened to pull him under, but the awareness of her presence kept him hovering in that half-dream state. He could still sense her, and the heady swirl of their combined sense in the recycled air made him feel dizzy. So he drifted, not fully asleep yet not entirely awake, suspended in the silent expanse of the jump corridor. Minutes or hours later, he couldn't be sure, he felt a shift in the cabin. He stirred, blinking, and found Rathani leaning over him. Her eyes glowed softly in the dim. What? He murmured, voice thick with drowsiness. She placed a hand on his shoulder. The contact was warm, firm. We have visitors, she whispered, inclining her head to the console. The proximity alarm blinked red, though the light spear was still locked in its jump course. Something is following us in the corridor. His heart raced as he stared at the readouts. Indeed, a faint energy signature trailed them. He cursed under his breath, quickly tapping at the console. This route is supposed to be rarely used, he hissed. Someone must have tracked us. Helion? Or pirates? Her jaw tightened. Does it matter? He tried scanning the signature. The readout came back with scrambled data. They must be running a stealth rig. They're piggybacking our corridor. As soon as we exit, they'll be right on top of us. Her stare was cold and focused. Then we must be ready. Terran's mind raced. The Lightspear's weapons are limited. We have a couple of turret blasts, but we can't hold out against a real warship. She placed a hand on his arm, meeting his eyes. Trust me. He didn't question the resolve in her gaze. The tension in the cockpit solidified into an almost tangible entity. He swallowed hard, running mental calculations. 2 hours until we exit the corridor. We'll have to make some quick maneuvers as soon as we revert to normal space. Her lips parted in a fierce grin. I'll handle the guns. You do the flying. He nodded, adrenaline spiking through him. Try not to blow us up in the process. She gave him a razor-sharp smile. No promises. That next stretch of time felt endless. They prepared in silence, Terran adjusting the ship's energy flow to boost shields, Radhani familiarizing herself with the manual turret controls. All the while, the unidentified pursuer maintained a steady distance behind them, never wavering. Terran's stomach twisted in knots. He couldn't help glancing at Radhani every so often. She was all coiled tension, poised like a predator ready to strike. A strange confidence radiated from her, and for the first time in a long while, Terran felt he wasn't alone in facing the danger that had hounded him for years. When the countdown to corridor exit flashed on the screen, Terran's hands slicked with sweat. He gripped the controls, knuckles white. Brace, he said. It's going to get rough. In a blaze of light, the light spear burst out of the jump corridor into normal space, stars sliding into sharp focus. Almost instantly, a massive ship emerged behind them, weapons hot. Terran's sensors pinged a warning, missile lock. Damn it, he growled, jerking the light spear into an evasive roll. Radhani, now! She slammed the turret controls, unleashing a volley of plasma fire. It crackled across the void, forcing the enemy ship to dodge. Terran glimpsed a jagged insignia on its hull, a stylized claw. Not Helion, but a pirate clan he recognized from rumors, the Red Claw Raiders. This might be just as bad. Explosions lit the darkness as the pirates fired back. Terran's heart hammered, but he channeled the adrenaline into sharp, precise maneuvers. He spun the light spear around a cluster of drifting meteoroids, using them as cover. Radhani peppered the pirates with turret blasts, each shot a deadly arc of plasma that illuminated the vacuum in streaks of blue-white fire. A near miss shook the hull, sparks showering from the overhead panels. Terran clenched his teeth, tapping frantically at the console to keep the shields from collapsing. I hope you're as good as you say you are, he hissed through gritted teeth. Radhani's voice was steady. Stay still for just a moment. He gaped at her. Are you insane? She ignored him, adjusting the turret's aim. Then, in a move that nearly stopped Terran's heart, she locked the turret's guidance on a large, drifting chunk of metallic debris behind them. The pirate ship advanced, laser cannons blazing, but she waited until they were in just the right position. Then, with a single well-placed plasma burst, she shattered the debris into a hail of shards that spewed forward like shrapnel. The pirates, caught off guard, plowed into the glittering metal storm. Terran watched in awe as the enemy ship's shields flared and shorted. He seized the moment to accelerate, tearing away from the wreckage. They'll recover, Radhani said calmly. But we've bought ourselves a head start. He managed to tear his stunned gaze from her. That was brilliant. Her eyes glowed, a thrill dancing across her scales. I told you I'd protect you. He felt a surge of gratitude, and something else, a fierce admiration that blurred into attraction. Right, he said, forcing himself to focus. We're not out of the woods yet. Let's see if we can make another jump before they catch us. But the NAV console beeped a negative. The drive needed time to cool down from the last jump, at least half an hour. Terran's heart sank. We need to find a place to hide, he said, scanning the star charts. Somewhere close, maybe that old outpost near Joss's nebula? Rathani frowned. You think we can slip by them again? He grimaced. We don't have a choice. He angled the ship, driving it toward a swirling cloud of cosmic dust off to port. The scanner showed the nebula was rife with electromagnetic interference, which might help mask them. The pirate ship was still behind them, but limping. Pulse pounding, Terran guided the light spear into the cloud. Vibrant shades of purple and teal enveloped them, the sensors flickering. The hull groaned under the nebular gases, but the pirate's presence faded on the scope. Terran let out a shaky breath. We might have lost them. Rathani's posture relaxed marginally. At least for the moment. She angled a look at him. You did well. He snorted. I prefer not to do well in near-death situations, but thanks. He felt that old itch of stress at the base of his skull. I'm going to try drifting here, quiet as we can, until the drive resets. He flicked switches, powering down non-essential systems. As the light spear settled into the nebula's cover, a heavy silence filled the cockpit. The tension of the fight still lingered in the air like static. Terran rubbed his temples, glancing at Rathani. Thanks for your help, he said softly. I wouldn't have pulled that debris trick myself. She inclined her head in acknowledgement. It was necessary. My people train for such tactics. Combat can be about cleverness, not just brute force. Their eyes met, and Terran felt the tension morph into something more intimate. He swallowed. So, your people. I've never actually fought alongside a Sothin before. She studied him carefully. And I've never fought alongside a human. I find you surprisingly resilient despite your fragile exterior. He huffed a quiet laugh. Thanks, I guess. His gaze fell to her lips, then up to her eyes again. The cockpit's lights highlighted the subtle patterns of her face. A wave of color rippled across her scales, as if reflecting his own uncertain emotions. He found himself leaning closer, drawn in by her warm glow. If she noticed, she didn't draw back. Then the console beeped, tearing them both out of the moment. Terran jerked around, flicking on the screen. The sensor readouts were scrambled by the nebula, but one line of text blinked in red: life support, warning, filter overload. He groaned. Damn it! Probably the damage from the fight. He jumped up from the pilot's seat. Rathani followed. How critical is it? He frowned, pulling open a maintenance panel. We can survive for a bit, but we need to fix it soon. Let me see if I can reroute the filtration. He crouched and started fiddling with wires. Heat poured off the damaged module, and sweat prickled under his collar. Rathani hovered behind him, her presence almost palpable. You're stressed again. Yeah, no kidding, he said, wincing as sparks flew from the damaged board. This thing is fried. If I can't patch it, we might not get enough oxygen once the backups run out. She kneeled, her body close enough that the faint luminescence cast a shimmer on his hands. Let me see, she offered, sliding up beside him. The tight space forced them to press shoulder to shoulder. Terran's mind whirled. Her closeness, her scent, a strange floral spice, stirred his senses, and his breath quickened. She reached into the compartment, deftly adjusting a bracket he hadn't noticed. My father taught me about mechanical systems. We used to maintain our own atmosphere suits during deep exploration. Let me handle this. Relinquishing the tools, Terran watched in silent awe as she expertly rerouted wires. She was surprisingly adept, twisting connectors and stabilizing the sizzling circuit with unerring precision. The overhead lights flickered, and then a steady hum replaced the frantic sputters. She exhaled, turning to meet his eyes. That should hold. Their faces were inches apart. Terran's heart thundered so loudly he was sure she could feel it vibrating the air. A drop of sweat rolled down his temple. He swallowed, struggling to find his voice. Thanks, he managed. You saved me. Again. Her scales glowed softly, a mesmerizing swirl of colors that he sensed was a reaction to her own fluttering emotions. Perhaps you'll believe me now. I don't want you dead, Taryn. He let out a shaky laugh. Starting to think you have a habit of collecting life debts. She shook her head, the filaments of her hair brushing his cheek, sending a tingle down his spine. No. I've never done this before. Being on the run was a solitary endeavor until I stumbled on your ship. He tried to breathe evenly, but the small space made it impossible to ignore her closeness. So, you're winging it, just like me, he murmured. She didn't reply, just kept looking at him with those luminous eyes. He felt something inside him surrender, a quiet acceptance that whatever happened next was out of his control. His hand slipped off the maintenance panel, nearly brushing her thigh. For a moment, he was acutely aware of how precarious their situation was, a drifting ship in a nebula, pirates somewhere behind them, Hellion goons in the broader galaxy, and all the countless miles of empty space. And here they were, pressed close, hearts pounding, uncertain but undeniably drawn to each other. Before he could rethink it, he leaned in. She met him halfway, and the warm press of her lips startled him with its softness. Her scaled skin against his was a jolt of sensation, unfamiliar but deeply enticing. He felt her exhale a small gasp, her hand rising to cup his jaw. The taste of her kiss was cool and electric, her filaments brushing his cheek in faint caresses. His senses lit up with a rush of adrenaline and something deeper, sweeter. She smelled of that ephemeral spice, layered now with the faint scent of ozone from the damaged systems. He lost himself in that kiss for a fleeting instant, letting go of all the fear and caution that had governed him for years. Her body shifted closer, pressing him against the bulkhead, her heat enveloping him. His hands found the ridges of her scales, sliding over her arms in a light exploration. She made a soft sound that resonated in his chest, somewhere between a purr and a sigh. Then, with an effort that felt like ripping part of his heart out, Taryn pulled back. His breath came fast. We should get back to the cockpit," he said hoarsely. Her eyes flickered, the swirl of color on her cheeks telling him she was as affected by the moment as he was. She nodded slowly, rising to her feet. Her composure was regal, but her breath betrayed an unsteady undercurrent. "Yes," she said quietly. "We should ensure the pirates haven't found us." Taryn swallowed, pushing off the floor. He tried not to let his gaze linger on the faint parting of her lips or the gentle heave of her chest. She turned away, heading back toward the front of the ship, leaving him to collect his scattered wits. He rubbed a hand over his face, adrenaline still singing in his veins. He hadn't planned for this. He never planned for any closeness, let alone with an alien woman who'd stowed away on his junker. But there was no denying the raw magnetism he felt whenever she was near. And ironically enough, it felt like she understood him on a level no one else had even tried to reach. He grabbed the tools and secured the maintenance panel. The life support had stabilized for now, but he knew it was only a temporary fix. They needed a real station or skilled mechanic to fix it properly. If they couldn't find that soon, they'd be playing a dangerous game of patchwork repairs in an endless flight from danger. Steadying himself, he returned to the cockpit. Rathani stood at the console, scanning the readouts with a cool, focused intensity. The swirling colors of the nebula played across the transparent steel viewport. Her posture was stiff, as if she was trying to compose herself after what had just passed between them. Taryn took the pilot's seat, heart pounding, but kept his tone neutral. "Any sign of the pirates?" Her voice was steady. "No. Our sensors are still scrambled, but I don't see any spikes indicating weapon fire." She tapped a control. "The NAV drive will be ready soon." He nodded, letting a silence stretch. The tension between them was tangible, but neither spoke of what had happened. Eventually, the console beeped. "We can jump," he said. "Or at least attempt to. Might as well see if we can get to a safer region. Maybe the border near the Ion Rift." She gave a curt nod. "Do it." Taryn punched in coordinates, each movement feeling heavier than usual. The star map shifted, the drive powered up, and in moments they shot back into the swirling kaleidoscope of faster-than-light travel. Once again, they were locked in that liminal space. Taryn tried not to dwell on the memory of her lips. Instead, he focused on the readouts. "Looks like an 8-hour jump," he said quietly. "We can take shifts resting." She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "All right." But neither of them moved. The overhead lights flickered, bathing them in shifting shadows. He wanted to speak, to break the quiet tension, but he didn't know what to say. Finally, she filled the silence. "I've never kissed a human before." He nearly choked on his own breath. A faint grin threatened to pull at his lips. "I've never kissed a Sarthin before. So I guess we're both new to this." She inclined her head. "It was," she trailed off, searching for the word. "Different. In my culture, scent and physical closeness mean a bond of trust. I hope you don't regret it." A swirl of warmth spread through his chest. "No," he said softly. "No regrets." He hesitated. "But I am cautious." Her gaze flickered. "Because you've been betrayed. I can sense that lingering mistrust." He clenched his jaw. "I can't help it. People close to me have a habit of disappearing or turning on me. I've been alone too long. I guess I don't know how to do this." She took a careful step toward him, her voice calm. "Nor do I." She lifted a hand, gently brushing her palm against his cheek. The scaled texture felt both strange and comforting. "But I won't vanish into the void, Taryn. Not while our fates are intertwined." He exhaled, closing his eyes for a second to savor the contact. Then he forced himself to shift away, though he longed to stay in her warmth. "We should rest," he said. "We'll have to be alert when we exit this jump. There's no telling what awaits us." She nodded, stepping back. "I'll take first watch." With that, she folded her arms over her chest, adopting a vigilant stance near the console. Taryn offered a grateful nod and moved to the back of the cockpit, pulling out a compact sleeping mat. He sank onto it, exhaustion rolling over him. As he let sleep draw him in, he saw Rathany's silhouette outlined by the faint glow of the jump corridor. His last thought was how surreal it felt to finally have someone stand watch over him, someone who seemed willing to shield him from the dangers of the galaxy. Perhaps, despite all the chaos, he'd found a chance at something he hadn't believed in for years: hope. When Taryn woke, stiff and disoriented, the jump corridor was still swirling outside. Rathany wasn't in the cockpit. He jolted upright, heart skipping, until he heard a soft sound from the corridor behind him. Rising carefully, he followed the noise. He found her at the cargo bay door, adjusting some cables. She looked up at him as he approached. "You rest like a rock," she remarked quietly. "I heard you groaning a few times." He rubbed his neck, recalling fragments of uneasy dreams. "Yeah, nightmares. Sorry." Her expression softened. "No need to apologize. I just wanted to let you rest, so I took a look at the wiring here." She gestured to a row of cables leading to the cargo hold's overhead lights. Something about her calm domesticity in that moment warmed him. The fearsome warrior who had shot down pirate ships was now tinkering with a flickering light, as though trying to make his environment just a little more bearable. "Thanks," he said awkwardly. "I appreciate that." She gave him a small smile, then her nostrils flared. "You smell rested. Less fear in your sweat." He grimaced. "That's a weird compliment, but thanks, I guess." Then a mischievous thought tugged at him. "Don't worry. I still won't shower for a while if that's what you're after." She emitted a soft laugh. "I suppose that might please me. But after what I witnessed during your last shower, it's not purely about your scent anymore." His cheeks heated. "Right. About that." He cleared his throat. "Let's just say that was an interesting station experience." She regarded him for a moment, her face unreadable. "It was necessary. I'd do it again if I had to." He didn't doubt it. "Where are we on time?" She nodded toward the cockpit. "Less than an hour until we exit. I'll let you take the seat. I don't have your skill with landing procedures." He followed her back, settling into the pilot's seat while she claimed the co-pilot's. Together, they watched the countdown tick away. Terran's nerves mounted as the final seconds approached. He gripped the controls, knuckles tight. Radhani was poised, her fingers resting near the weapons panel. They emerged into normal space again, braced for danger, but the sensors showed nothing. A wide, star-dappled expanse stretched out before them, and Terran let out a relieved breath. "Looks clear," he said, scanning the area. "Finally, some peace." He found a course that would take them near a small, uninhabited planet on the edge of the Ion Rift. If memory served, there might be a derelict outpost on one of its moons. It was old and mostly abandoned, but might hold spare parts or a place to hide. Terran set the coordinates and eased the ship forward at sublight speed. The swirl of the rift glowed in the distance, a tapestry of ionized particles. Seeing it again reminded him of simpler times, back when he and his father took cargo runs across the galaxy without fear of Helion pursuit. Radhani watched him, her gaze pensive. After a moment, she spoke. "You're remembering something." He shrugged, hands light on the controls. "Just old memories. My dad used to say the Ion Rift was one of the universe's prettiest death traps. He wasn't wrong." She nodded, not pressing. They spent the next few hours in relative quiet, tension only occasionally flaring when a sensor pinged or the console flickered. But no signs of pursuit appeared. Terran relaxed a fraction, letting himself enjoy the hush of deep space. Eventually, they neared the planet, a dull gray orb with swirling dust storms. One of its moons was locked in geostationary orbit above the planet's northern hemisphere. As the light spear approached, Terran could see the faint silhouette of a long-abandoned outpost hugging the moon's cratered surface. He scanned for life signs, picking up only minimal readings. "Looks empty," he said. "We can land, see if there's anything salvageable." Radhani nodded. "It might also be a decent place to hide until we plan our next move." Terran guided the light spear through the thin atmosphere, setting down on a cracked landing pad outside the outpost. The old structure was half collapsed, battered by meteor impacts and the relentless assault of cosmic radiation. He powered down the engines, letting the thrusters hiss to a halt. The silence of a dead moon enveloped them. They grabbed respirators and sidearms, just in case. Stepping out onto the dusty ground, Terran winced at the stale smell that seeped into his mask. The outpost had no functioning life support, just a few flickering lights and what remained of the main corridor. Radhani moved beside him, quiet and alert. Her scales glowed softly in the low light, an otherworldly beacon in the gloom. He followed the corridor until they reached what must have been a storage area. Broken crates and rusted machinery littered the floor. Terran sighed. "Doesn't look like much is left. Probably picked clean by scavengers decades ago." Radhani crouched near a rusted panel, prying it open. She reached in, pulling out a small metal cylinder. "Is this anything we can use?" He peered at it. "That's an old power cell. Might still have some charge." "Good find." She handed it to him, their fingers brushing. The contact sent a faint jolt through his senses, reminding him of the kiss they'd shared. He cleared his throat and tucked the cell into his satchel. "Let's see if there's a control room. Maybe we can power up a local system." They moved deeper, picking their way around debris. The flickering lights cast eerie shadows on the walls. Radhani paused at one corridor intersection, her eyes narrowing. "I sense something," she murmured. Terran went still, scanning with his flashlight. "A presence?" She nodded. "Faint. Could be wildlife, or something mechanical." She slipped ahead, silent as a cat, leaving Terran to follow. Her posture told him she was ready for trouble. He checked his sidearm, every nerve on edge. The corridor opened into a larger chamber, some kind of lab or research facility. Broken glass and overturned tables gave it a haunted look. Radhani paused by a console. A faint hum indicated it still had minimal power. She ran her fingers over the controls, and a flicker of light brought up a partial display of old logs. Terran peered at them over her shoulder, but most of the text was corrupted. "Whatever they were researching," he said. It's been lost to time. Rat Honey frowned. They may have left something behind. She tapped a control, and the overhead lights snapped on, revealing a side room sealed by a heavy door. Through the viewing panel, Terran glimpsed a row of cylindrical chambers. Suspended inside were shapes he couldn't quite make out. Looks like stasis pods, he muttered, stepping closer. The door's controls were offline. He pried open a panel, messing with the wiring. Rat Honey helped, her scaled hands deftly rearranging connectors. After a minute, the door hissed, sliding open halfway. A rush of stale air greeted them. Flashlights sweeping the area, they stepped inside. Row upon row of stasis pods lined the walls, all powered down. Inside each pod, a withered form lay, some unrecognizable species trapped in half-preserved states. Terran's stomach churned. This was no ordinary outpost. Someone had been conducting illicit experiments or storing living specimens. He approached one pod, shining his light. Dead? He breathed. They've been here a long time. Rathany's jaw tightened. Slavers, maybe? Or a private corporation? She looked over the pods with a grim expression. We're too late to help them. Terran nodded. Let's not linger. The place felt wrong, as though the ghosts of the dead watched them from the corners. He turned to leave, but Rat Honey paused at a console in the corner, fiddling with the data port. She inserted a small device from her belt, and lines of code scrolled across the screen. Terran waited, uneasy. After a moment, she withdrew the device. Corrupted data, but I recovered a partial file. Might be worthless. Let's go. They left the stasis room, hearts heavy, continuing through the outpost. Eventually they found a small control center with a flickering generator. Terran poked at it. Might be able to pull some fuel rods. Could help us power certain systems on the light spear. Rat Honey nodded, standing guard. In the gloom, her presence was like a silent sentinel. Her eyes flicked to him occasionally, worry etched in her alien features. The memory of their shared kiss lingered, but the haunting nature of the outpost dampened any flicker of desire. They managed to salvage a few fuel rods. Terran tried to lighten the mood. At least we won't starve. We still have those algae chips. Rathany's lips curved faintly. If I must eat them again, I'll endure. But I'm not fond of them. He offered a wry smirk. Yeah, they're not exactly gourmet. Maybe one day we'll find a planet with real food. She gave a small nod, but her gaze flicked toward the corridor. He sensed her tension. We should leave soon, she said. This place feels poisoned by old horrors. He couldn't argue with that. Gathering their finds, they retraced their steps to the main entrance. The stale air pressed in, reminding Terran of long-dead secrets best left buried. But he froze near the exit, hearing a soft clang echo from the corridor behind them. He lifted his pistol. That wasn't us, he whispered. Rat Honey responded with swift grace, pressing against the wall. Her nostrils flared. I smell someone. Organic. Alive. Terran's heart hammered. Pirates? Or scavengers? They edged down the corridor, searching. The clang repeated, closer this time. Rounding a corner, Terran nearly stumbled upon a lanky figure in a ragged environment suit rummaging through a crate. The figure startled, spinning around with a blaster raised. Terran and Rat Honey leveled their weapons in response. Whoa! The stranger cried, voice crackling through a suit helmet. I'm not looking for trouble. Terran held his stance. Who are you? The stranger's visor lifted slightly, revealing tired eyes. Name's Kiva. I'm just scavenging. You're not with the Hellion, are you? Terran grimaced. No. We're not. Put the gun down. Kiva hesitated, then lowered the blaster. Look, I'm alone. The outpost's been dead for decades. Figured I might find something to sell. Didn't expect company. Rat Honey didn't relax. Did you see the stasis pods? She asked, her tone sharp. Kiva nodded slowly. Yeah. Creepy stuff. I've been in and out of this place for weeks, scrounging bits and pieces. That stasis room. I steer clear. She eyed Rathany's scales, curiosity evident. So are you two, together? Taryn stiffened. That's our business. Why are you here alone? Kiva sighed. Times are tough. Everyone's running from Helion or from some war. I ended up here. Not much else to do. She glanced at Taryn's satchel. You found anything good? Taryn snorted. Maybe. But we're not here to trade. Kiva raised her hands in a placating gesture. Understood. No problem. Look, I'll be on my way. She backed off, turning down another corridor. As she retreated, Taryn couldn't help but feel an odd sympathy. The galaxy was full of desperate souls like them. Let's go, Rathani murmured. They left the outposts behind, stepping out onto the moon's surface and returning to the light spear. The cold starlight glimmered on the battered hull. Taryn felt a wave of relief once he sealed the airlock. The stale, haunted air of the facility was behind them now. Back in the cargo bay, they inspected their salvaged fuel rods and power cells. Taryn's lips twitched in a small smile. Not a total waste. We might extend our jump range with ease. Rathani nodded, but she looked distant. So many tragedies in this galaxy, she murmured. So many broken paths. He reached out, resting a hand on her arm. Yeah. It's tough. But we keep going. His voice sounded hollow even to him. He felt an overwhelming urge to comfort her, perhaps because her sadness echoed his own disillusionment with how cruel the universe could be. With a gentle squeeze, he guided her toward the cockpit. Let's get out of here. They took off, leaving the desolate outposts behind. Once in orbit, Taryn loaded the new fuel rods into the ship's power system. A wave of relief spread through him as the readouts improved. We can make a longer jump now. Rathani stood by the console. Do you have a destination in mind? He pursed his lips. There's a rumor of a free port out near the Keshari belt. Might be a place we can lay low, fix the life support for real, and figure out next steps. She nodded, but her gaze lingered on him, a question in her eyes he couldn't quite parse. He pretended not to notice, focusing on punching in coordinates. Let's see if we can do this in one jump. Might strain the drive, but at least we'll be out of immediate pirate territory. She placed a hand on his shoulder, a comforting weight. I trust your judgment. He inhaled, heart fluttering at her closeness. All right. Here goes. He engaged the jump drive. The light spear hummed, and the stars stretched into ribbons. They were hurled once more into that blue-green corridor of shifting energy. Taryn let himself sink back in the seat, a mixture of fatigue and relief washing over him. Rathani settled in beside him, quiet. After a moment, she spoke softly, her tone like a confession. When we kissed, did you sense something? Taryn's pulse quickened. He remembered the electric surge of that moment, how her scent and taste filled him with an inexplicable longing. He swallowed. Yeah, he admitted. I did. It felt different from anything I've known. She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her hands. For my people, physical contact is a bond that doesn't form lightly. Even if it wasn't a formal ritual. I want you to know, it mattered to me. Her candor caught him off guard. He reached out, covering her hand with his. Her scales were warm, her filaments softly pulsing. It mattered to me, too, he said, voice rough. I'm not sure what this means for us. We're running for our lives, and the galaxy's not exactly the safest place to figure out. She leaned in, brushing her lips over his in a light, lingering kiss that dissolved any further words. He melted into the contact, letting the tension in his chest release. Her scent, though not as strong as before his shower, was still a heady mix of spice and something that reminded him of stars at dusk. The kiss was slower this time, filled with the unspoken promise that they might dare to lean on each other, even in the face of danger. When they pulled apart, Taryn's heart pounded. He rested his forehead against hers, breathing unsteadily. Rathani, he murmured, uncertain how to articulate the swirl of feelings inside him. She touched her forehead to his. Maybe we survive first. Then decide what this bond means. He let out a breathless laugh. Deal. We can talk more about it once we're safe. She nodded, pulling back. They resumed their seats, though the air crackled with charged awareness. Taryn couldn't stop glancing her way. The jump corridor's light washed over her scales, highlighting the ridges and shimmering patterns that had become so strangely dear to him. Hours passed, and eventually the light spear surged free of the corridor, emerging near the Keshari belt, a vast field of drifting ice and rock. Far in the distance, Terence spied the faint glow of a space station, the rumored free port. Relief swelled in his chest. We made it, he said, guiding the ship closer. Let's hope this place lives up to the stories. As they neared, the station's details came into focus. It was cobbled together from repurposed hulls and old cargo modules, forming a sprawling ring where ships of various makes docked. Neon lights flickered at intervals, signs advertising bars, mechanics, black market vendors. Taryn keyed the comm, requesting docking permission. A bored-sounding controller gave them a berth in a lower ring, typical for newcomers with limited credits. They eased in, docking clamps locking on. Taryn powered down the engines, shoulders sagging with relief. All right, he said. We should be careful. Places like this can be a haven for criminals. Rathany's expression was guarded. Criminals or not, we can handle it. He smirked, powering off the last of the flight controls. Right. Let's see if we can find a decent mechanic to fix our life support, and maybe pick up supplies that don't taste like dirt. Rising from the pilot's seat, he patted his holstered sidearm. We should be prepared for anything. This station might be neutral in theory, but credits talk louder than treaties. She stood with him, tension in her posture. Lead the way. Together, they exited the light spear onto a bustling dock. The station's interior was alive with a chaotic blend of species, noise, and neon lights. The smell of fried protein mixes, spilled liquor, and unwashed bodies assaulted Taryn's nose. Rathany wrinkled her own nose, flicking her gaze around. They pushed through the crowds, searching for a reputable mechanic. Vendors shouted from stalls, hawking everything from spaceship parts to questionable delicacies. Taryn tried not to draw attention, keeping his head down and his hand near his blaster. They reached a shop sporting a flashing sign, Misha's Mech Emporium. Taryn took a breath and stepped in. A wiry figure with goggles perched on a nest of braided hair glanced up from a counter. Looking for parts or repairs? The mechanic asked, voice nasal. Taryn forced a polite smile. Repairs. Life support mainly, plus a system check. Misha adjusted the goggles. Docking slip? Bay 14, lower ring. Taryn said. The mechanic snorted. Figures. All the desperate ones end up down there. 10,000 credits up front, then I'll see about your life support. Taryn's stomach dropped. That's robbery. We don't have that kind of money. Misha shrugged, turning back to a half-disassembled droid on the counter. Then you can choke on your own CO2 for all I care. This is a free port, pal, not a charity. Anger flared in Taryn, but before he could speak, Rathany stepped forward, leveling a stare at Misha. Her scales glowed faintly. We can offer trade, she said firmly. Rare power cells. And perhaps assistance if you find yourself in danger. Misha raised an eyebrow, glancing at Rathany's imposing figure. Huh. Sar thin, ain't ya? Heard you folks can put up a real nasty fight. Rathany shrugged, her gaze unwavering. We're capable. So, do we have a deal? Misha looked between them, weighing options. Fine. I'll take a look at your ship for a pair of fully charged power cells. If the job's more complicated, we'll renegotiate. That's the best I can do. Taryn shot Rathany a grateful look. Deal, he said. We'll show you the cells. They're on our ship. Misha nodded. I'll swing by in an hour. Gotta finish up here first. Don't run off. They left the shop, Taryn letting out a breath he'd been holding. That was decent. We still have at least one cell left for ourselves. Rathany offered a small smile. You see? Sometimes intimidation works. Taryn chuckled. Sometimes. They wandered further along the ring, scanning signs for a place to grab a meal. A neon sign reading the Astral Brew beckoned, and Terran's stomach rumbled. He gestured for Rathani to follow him inside. The bar was smoky, dimly lit, packed with patrons of countless species. Terran found a small booth in the corner and slid in. Rathani sat across from him, her elongated limbs folding gracefully. A server approached, and Terran ordered a pair of house specials, hoping they were at least edible. Rathani observed the boisterous crowd with detached curiosity. It's strange, seeing so many species in one place, she murmured. Even my old expedition didn't hold such a variety. Terran nodded, leaning back. Free ports attract everyone, merchants, mercenaries, runaways. It's a melting pot of the galaxy's best and worst. She studied a group of rowdy pirates at a nearby table. I can smell the tension in the air. So many conflicts simmering. He gazed at her, drawn to the subtle luminescent patterns on her cheeks. You do that a lot, talk about smelling emotions. Must be intense in a place like this. She gave a small nod. It's overwhelming. But also fascinating. Your kind, it's as if your emotions are always on the surface, easy to read. She fixed him with a pointed look. Yours are especially strong. His cheeks warmed. Yeah, well, I've got a lot to be emotional about. Running for your life tends to do that. Their food arrived, 2 steaming bowls of thick stew and a pitcher of what smelled like fermented fruit. Terran paid with a few credits, then eyed the meal skeptically. Let's hope this doesn't kill us. He took a tentative bite, found it surprisingly savory. He gestured for Rathani to try hers. She spooned a small portion to her lips, tasting it delicately. The glow on her scales shifted as she swallowed, her expression neutral. It's acceptable, she concluded, then took another bite. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the noise of the bar forming a backdrop. Terran found his eyes drawn to Rathani again and again, watching how her lips curved around the spoon, how the color on her cheeks danced in changing patterns. The memory of their kiss warmed him. He sensed that the bond between them was strengthening, even if either had voiced it openly. He liked her presence. Not just because she was strong or exotic, but because underneath that formidable exterior, she showed genuine concern for him. For them. He was about to break the silence with some joke when a sudden commotion at a nearby table drew his attention. The rowdy pirates had risen, voices raised, flinging insults at a cloaked figure. One of them knocked the figure's hood back, revealing a reptilian alien who hissed in alarm. Terran tensed, scanning for potential danger to him and Rathani. The pirates seemed more interested in harassing that poor stranger than in starting a brawl with the entire bar. Still, Terran nudged Rathani's leg under the table. Keep an eye on that, just in case. She nodded, eyes narrowed. The tension in the bar spiked. People shifted, preparing for violence. Sure enough, a pirate lunged at the reptilian alien, grabbing them by the collar. The alien struggled, choking out a protest. Terran's hand drifted to his sidearm, unsure if he should intervene. A few other patrons watched intently but didn't move. Suddenly, the cloaked alien spat a jet of green fluid right into the pirate's face. The pirate howled, stumbling back, hands flying to his eyes. Chaos erupted as the pirate's companions drew their weapons, table and chairs crashing over. Terran cursed, ducking low, trying to pull Rathani down with him. A stray blaster shot sizzled over their heads. Rathani's eyes flashed. We need to leave, she hissed, rising to slip through the confusion. Terran followed, weaving past the brawl already spiraling out of control. Patrons shouted, fists and weapons flying. He narrowly dodged a thrown glass, heart pounding. Rathani led the way, her agile movements parting the crowd as she deflected a pirate's swinging arm with surprising strength. The man crashed into a table, toppling drinks everywhere. They burst out onto the ring corridor, panting. Inside, the brawl continued, the bar's neon sign flickering ominously. Terran let out a breathy laugh, adrenaline spiking. So much for a peaceful meal. Rathani's chest heaved, her scales flickering with leftover tension. Indeed. This place is more chaotic than I anticipated. He scanned her face. She had a small bruise forming along her jaw. You got hit? He asked, worry creeping into his voice. She shrugged. A fist, nothing more. I barely felt it. Something protective flared in him. Let's get back to the ship. Misha said an hour. It's probably been close to that. She nodded, and they returned to the light spear, passing other miscreants and travelers who paid them little heed. Once inside, Terran exhaled with relief. The battered hull of his ship felt like a sanctuary in comparison to the chaos outside. Rathani sank onto a crate, pressing a hand to her jaw. He found a small medical kit, rummaging for a healing salve. Kneeling beside her, he gently applied it, his fingers brushing her scales. She watched him closely, eyes soft. Thank you, she murmured. The warmth of her breath tingled against his hand. He tried to focus on being practical. It's no problem. Wouldn't want that bruise to worsen. Her gaze lingered on his face, and he felt that familiar magnetic pull. Before he could stop himself, he leaned in, brushing a light kiss along her cheek, just where the bruise had formed. She drew in a soft breath, and the swirl of color on her scales spread in intricate patterns. Their eyes locked, and Terran's heart thundered. He felt her hand slide up the side of his neck. He pressed another kiss, this time at the corner of her mouth, the shared tension unraveling. She turned her head, capturing his lips fully, and the taste of her made him forget the station, the brawl, even the threat of Helion. There was only the quiet hum of the ship and the warmth of her body leaning into him. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Rathani's scaled hand lingered on his chest. Your heartbeat is so rapid, she observed, voice hushed. He gave a shaky laugh. Yeah. You have that effect on me. And so does nearly dying every other day. A faint smirk touched her lips. She trailed her hand down to his waist, slipping under the hem of his shirt to rest against bare skin. He felt his pulse jump again, raw desire mixing with the sense that this moment had been building from the second he found her on his ship. I want, she began, but she trailed off, searching for words. Instead of finishing, she gently pulled him closer. Her breath mingled with his, her luminous scales shifting in a low, sensuous pattern. Terran's rational mind flailed for a moment, reminding him that Misha might arrive soon, that they were in the middle of a hazardous free port with enemies possibly lurking. But the gentle insistence of Rathani's lips against his neck drowned out caution. Her scent enveloped him, spice and ozone, charged with an undercurrent of something sweet. He cradled her face, returning her kiss, letting the pent-up fear and tension unravel into longing. Time slipped away as they explored each other's warmth, each kiss deepening the unspoken bond. She guided him deeper into the cargo bay, away from the open hatch. He ran his hands along her arms, tracing the raised ridges of her scales, marveling at how her body responded with waves of luminescence. The quiet moan that escaped her lips spurred him on, his own breath ragged. He could scarcely believe how intensely he wanted this. As her fingers curled into his hair, she whispered something in her own language. He didn't understand the words, but the emotion behind them was clear: desire, tenderness, a plea for closeness that transcended species. He kissed the side of her throat, feeling the subtle shift of her filaments brush his cheek. Her body pressed closer, a radiant heat that made the rest of the world vanish. Something beeped sharply by the cargo entrance, jolting them. Terran's eyes flew open, chest heaving. The door slid aside, revealing Misha standing there, toolbox in hand, eyebrows raised behind those goggles. Wow, Misha said, clearing their throat. Sorry to interrupt, but you said you wanted your ship fixed, right? Terran cursed under his breath, stepping back from Rathani, whose cheeks flared with color. She seemed less embarrassed than annoyed at the interruption. He forced himself to level his breathing. Right, yeah? Sorry, come in. Misha strode in, trying, and failing, not to smirk. Hey, I've seen worse. Let's get to it. Rathani moved aside, arms folded, still radiating tension. Terran silently wished for a moment to compose himself. But business was business. He led Misha to the life support unit, explaining the earlier jerry-rigging. The mechanic whistled at the damage. You're lucky you didn't suffocate. This is borderline scrap. Might need more than just a patch job. Terran felt his heart sink. Can you fix it? Misha shrugged. Sure, if you don't mind me ripping out half your system and replacing it with something from the junkyard. It'll cost ya. But we've got those power cells you promised, right? Rathani fetched them, handing them over with a wary look in her eye. Misha popped them open, tested their charge, and grunted approval. Good. I'll get to work. Terran exhaled, stepping back to let Misha do the job. Rathani lingered near him, her posture still reflecting a mixture of residual desire and frustration at being interrupted. He brushed his hand lightly against hers, a silent promise that they'd continue the conversation later. The corner of her mouth turned up slightly. Misha worked for hours, cursing and clanging. The light spear's corridors filled with the whir of tools and the smell of burnt wiring. Terran tried to help, but Misha mostly pushed him away. This is delicate. The mechanic muttered. One wrong connection and you'll blow your atmosphere regulators sky high. Rathani observed from a short distance, occasionally shooting Terran a quick, heated glance that made him reconsider everything. The stolen kisses in the cargo bay left him hungry for more, but they had to prioritize survival. Finally, Misha let out a triumphant whoop. Done. She's not pretty, but it'll hold. You'll need a real overhaul eventually, but this should keep you breathing. Terran inspected the newly installed components. Thank you, he said, genuinely relieved. The life support readouts showed stable operation, and the oxygen recycling capacity was back to normal levels. We really appreciate it. Misha nodded, hooking the toolbox onto a belt. We're even, then. If you need more work, come back with more cells or credits. Good luck out there. The mechanic cast a final glance between Terran and Rathani, an amused twinkle in their eye, then strode off. As the hatch closed, Terran let out a long breath, turning to Rathani. We can actually breathe easy now. That's progress. She leaned against the bulkhead, arms still folded. Indeed. Her gaze settled on him, the unspoken tension returning full force. Now that the crisis is handled. He felt his chest tighten with anticipation. You mean our earlier conversation? Her scales glimmered with a renewed spark. We left it unfinished. Heat flooded Terran's face. He nodded, stepping closer. The hum of the ship seemed to quiet in that moment, as though granting them privacy. We can finish it now, he murmured. She inhaled deeply, letting her arms drop. This time, she said, no interruptions. He didn't wait for any further cue. He closed the distance, wrapping his arms around her. Their mouths met in a fervent kiss, a release of all the pent-up longing that had built over these tense days of danger. She made a soft sound of approval, pressing against him, her scaled skin warm beneath his hands. The swirl of color on her neck and cheeks nearly mesmerized him, painting the moment with an otherworldly glow. He trailed his lips along her jaw, losing himself in the rush of her scent, the taste of her skin, salty, electric, alien and enchanting. She tilted her head back, eyes half-lidded. I've never wanted another being's closeness like this, she whispered, voice unsteady. He kissed the space beneath her ear. Neither have I, he admitted, the confession breaking something in him. In her presence, it felt safe to be vulnerable. It's terrifying and thrilling at the same time. She answered by pulling him closer, guiding him toward the small sleeping area in the back of the ship. The overhead lights were dim, but her scales cast a gentle luminescence across the cramped space. Their breaths mingled, hearts pounding in unison. Terran's mind spun. He'd never expected to find this kind of connection with anyone, let alone an alien fugitive. Yet here they were, forging a bond in the midst of chaos. His hands roamed her sides, feeling the shifting texture of her scales under the thin fabric of her attire. She trembled against him, her own palms sliding beneath his shirt to explore the planes of his back. The next minutes passed in a haze of heated kisses, whispered confessions, and the slow unveiling of each other's bodies. They navigated each new curve, each new ridge and scar, with careful reverence, letting out hushed gasps whenever they discovered a sensitive spot. The desire that flared between them was as raw as it was intimate. She seemed fascinated by every inch of him, inhaling his newly clean scent mixed with the fresh layer of sweat that now beaded on his skin. He moaned when her lips discovered the hollow at his collarbone, a place no one had touched so gently in years. She shivered when he traced the intricate patterns on her shoulders, following the luminescent lines with feather-light fingers. In the hush of that intimate space, they surrendered to the urgency of their bond. Taryn felt the world narrow until it was just the two of them, locked in an embrace that transcended language and species. Her scales pressed cool and smooth against his chest, her filaments brushing his cheek like silk. She let out a breathy laugh at one point, maybe surprised by the heat of human skin, maybe amused at her own uncharacteristic abandon. He found himself smiling against her lips. "Are you sure?" he murmured once, voice hoarse, wanting to be certain she wasn't leaping into something without thought. She answered by kissing him harder, a low rumble vibrating in her chest. "Yes," she whispered, a half-growl that sounded like it came from deep within her. "More than sure." Her hand tangled in his hair, pulling him closer. They came together in a flurry of breathless urgency, each touch stoking the fire that burned between them. Taryn's heart ached with the intensity of it. For the first time in years, he felt alive, not merely surviving day to day. Rathany's sighs and moans tangled with his own, a concert of raw longing echoing through the cramped cabin. They sank onto the narrow bunk, tangled in each other's limbs, oblivious to everything but the pounding of their hearts and the press of their bodies. When at last the waves of pleasure subsided, they remained intertwined, chests rising and falling in tandem. Taryn buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling the lingering spice of her scent. She trailed lazy patterns across his back with her fingertips, silent except for the gentle hum in her throat that seemed to soothe him from within. Neither spoke for a time. There was no need for words. They drifted in that post-bliss haze, letting their hearts slow and their breathing synchronize. Eventually, Taryn stirred, propping himself up on an elbow. His hair stuck out in every direction, and he was acutely aware of the alien woman lying beneath him, her scales glowing with contentment. He brushed a strand of her filament hair aside, marveling at the softness. I don't know what comes next," he admitted softly. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with surprising tenderness. "We figure it out," she said, voice gentle. "We have time now, yes?" He exhaled, the weight of their chaotic journey pressing in. "We've got enemies out there. The Helion conglomerate wants me dead. We've got pirates who might still be tracking us. Your own people might come looking for you." She reached up, cupping his cheek. "We'll face them. Together." A quiet sense of determination welled in him. He nodded, leaning down to plant a light kiss on her lips. As uncertain as the future was, he realized he didn't feel as alone anymore. For better or worse, they shared a bond that neither danger nor fear could break easily. A beep from the cockpit console made them both tense. Taryn glanced over. "Incoming calm," he sighed, pulling himself away from her warm embrace. They hurriedly dressed, hearts still thudding from their shared intimacy. In the cockpit, Taryn activated the console. The screen flickered, revealing Misha's face. "Heads up," the mechanic said, sounding tense. "Some folks just rolled into the station, asking around for a human pilot and a Sarthan woman. Didn't get their affiliation, but they seemed well-funded. I lied and said I never saw you, but they might come snooping." Taryn's gut twisted. "Thanks for the warning." Misha nodded. "Don't mention it. Just thought you'd want to know. If you plan on running, do it quick. These guys mean business." The transmission ended. Rathany's lips thinned, her scales darkening with worry. "They've found us." Taryn clenched his jaw. "Helion, or my guess is a new group. Doesn't matter. We have to go. The Lightspear systems are operational enough to leave." She nodded. "I'll help you prepare for takeoff." He blew out a breath, flicking switches, powering up the ship. Every muscle in his body ached, but the adrenaline of impending danger coursed through him again. "Let's get out of here." They worked together, stowing loose supplies. Soon, the light spear thrummed with renewed energy. Terran fired the thrusters, releasing the docking clamps. As they lifted off from the free port, Terran spied a small group of armed figures rushing onto the dock below. He cursed. They're here already. The station's traffic control demanded a departure code. Terran quickly punched in an override, pushing the throttle. The light spear tore away from the lower ring, weaving past startled ships. Alarms blared, and red lights strobed along the docking ring. Hang on, Terran muttered. Rathani braced herself, eyes locked on the scanners. 2 vessels pursuing, she said. They're powering weapons. Terran set his jaw. Let's see if Misha's repairs hold up. He banked the light spear hard hammering. The calm crackled with an incoming hail from the pursuing ships, but he ignored it. We're out of time for negotiations. He angled toward open space, fingers dancing over the console to spool up the jump drive. It needed a short charge cycle, but the pursuers wouldn't give them much time. Rathani manned the turret, face set with grim determination. Plasma bolts streaked past the viewport, rocking the light spear. Terran gritted his teeth. Shields at half. We just need a few more minutes. Rathani opened fire, forcing the pursuers to break formation. One shot grazed their lead ship, sending it spinning. The second closed in, unleashing a barrage that rattled the entire cockpit. Warnings blared. Terran cursed, rerouting power from non-essential systems. The overhead lights flickered. Finally, the jump drive pinged ready. Strap in, he shouted. Rathani slammed one last volley of plasma at the enemy. Terran engaged the drive, the stars warping as the light spear vanished into faster-than-light, leaving the free port and its dangers behind. The ship shuddered violently, but they punched through. When the jump corridor solidified around them, Terran exhaled, muscles trembling. Rathani sank into the co-pilot's seat, face pale. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, hearts pounding. She reached over, covering his hand on the throttle. We made it. He nodded, blinking away the sweat burning his eyes. Somehow. The hum of the jump corridor filled the silence. I have no idea where we'll end up. Her fingers squeezed his. We'll face that together, too. Perhaps each new place brings us closer to freedom. He managed a weary smile, pulling her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss against her scaled knuckles. Her eyes fluttered closed, the swirling colors on her cheeks mellowing into a soft glow. The terror and the uncertainty of the future lay ahead like a vast uncharted map, but they had each other, bound by desperation, by fate, and by the unspoken promise born from their shared vulnerability. He let go of her hand and turned to the console, adjusting course for a safer region. She leaned back, resting her head against the seat. Despite the swirling corridor outside, the hum of the engines, and the aftershocks of near disaster, a quiet sense of peace settled over them. Their bond had been forged in danger and sealed by intimacy. Whatever the next jump revealed, they would face it side by side. Above all else, Terran knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was no longer alone in the galaxy. And for the first time in a long time, that gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, he could stop running and find something worth living for, something that smelled like love and tasted of possibility.